Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet, 4 million unique users, syndicated by CRN Digital Talk Radio to an additional 12 million households, available on demand all over the place. And I remind you to go to reportergary.com, check it early and often, like voting in Chicago, for stories that you may or may not see, hear, or read in the mainstream media. Now, speaking of voting in Chicago, imagine coming to Washington, D.C. to be the right-hand man of the President of the United States as his chief of staff, and then leaving to run for mayor of Chicago, only to learn today, as Rahm Emanuel has, that he is ineligible to run for mayor of Chicago. Joining us to talk about that and a prelude to the State of the Union address tomorrow is Victoria Jones from the Talk Radio News Service, our Washington Bureau. There she is. Here she is. Victoria, welcome to News Talk Online on the Paltalk News Network.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. So what's the deal with Rahm Emanuel?
Well, very interesting. An Illinois appellate court ruled today that our former White House Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, is ineligible to run for Chicago mayor because he doesn't meet the residency requirements of the office. It was a 2-to-1 vote, and the ballot is February 22nd, and he should not appear on this. It's a pretty stunning blow because he was the clear favorite, 44% of the vote in most recent polls. So he will appeal the ruling with the Illinois Supreme Court, probably maybe by close of business, and 4 of the 7 state Supreme Court justices must agree to hear the case. And there are apparently some compelling arguments if they get the chance. And one of the arguments is that it's highly unusual for an appeals court to overturn a Board of Elections decision, and the board ruled earlier that he did satisfy the residency requirement. And another more practical argument would be that voters have a right to determine whether Emanuel is enough of a resident to qualify for office. And another thing is that they say that if it's a close case legally, the Illinois Supreme Court should and likely would leave the decision to voters rather than have it decided by the courts. But, you know, they really don't know. And also it's thought that the court will probably examine the facts from scratch. But of course, then there's a whole question of time. You know, February the 22nd is close.
So are the ballots already printed? If they...
No, actually, my understanding is they're not printed, and that's one of the other issues. Rahm Emanuel wants his name on the ballot just in case, rather than his name off the ballot just in case.
Of course he does, because imagine if they rule that he is not eligible to vote and people vote him into office anyway. That should be an overwhelming case to take to the courts, that they wanted Rahm Emanuel, notwithstanding the fact that the court ruled that he was disqualified.
Right.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that's very interesting is that the President of the United States, and we will be carrying it live here on the Paltalk News Network, and afterward we will have analyses from people on all sides of the political spectrum, and your attempts, ladies and gentlemen, opportunities, ladies and gentlemen, to call in and be heard. His State of the Union address. And it's very interesting because, as we've been discussing during the midterm elections and during the swearing in and the several weeks after of the new Congress, that the Republicans who control the House are in this austerity mood to cut. And almost stunningly today, President Obama said, no. The answer to our economic woes is not to cut, it's to spend. And I guess we're going to hear that tomorrow.
He would call it invest, not spend.
Well, if you're investing...
That's how the White House is viewing this. Competitiveness initiative is what they're saying, and increasing the number of exports. But they're saying, yes, they need to invest. in certain things, and they're talking about education, infrastructure, they're talking about scientific research, they're talking about high-speed rail, things like that. But they're saying, yes, we do need to invest, the Democrats will call it that, in certain things in order to grow.
I don't understand why, frankly, when they came up with this idea of a stimulus package, they just didn't say, like Dwight Eisenhower did with the interstates, what we're going to do is we're going to put in high-speed rail throughout the United States because of the energy crisis, and to make us less dependent, it would make us a more secure nation because we wouldn't be dependent on foreign oil, and it would create all these jobs in virtually every nook and cranny of the country, and forget about all this other stuff. And yet, instead of that, the Republicans are talking about decimating Amtrak almost completely.
That's right. With the exception of the some of the northeastern corridor, which is sort of almost successful. Basically, they would be decimating it almost completely. And the president is saying, no, let's invest $8 billion in speed rail, which I have to tell you is not enough money to do what needs to be done to get the kind of high-speed rail to make us competitive with, for example, China.
No, of course not. It's, and the Acela is not really a high-speed train. It's a fast train, but it's not high-speed as compared to what everybody else has.
Train. No, exactly,
no.
Exactly.
I mean, you pay 3 times as much for a trip from New York to Washington, D.C., and you get there 30 minutes or 20 minutes sooner. Big deal.
That's right. That's exactly what the Acela is. It's about 20 minutes sooner. That's it. And that's on a good day.
Right, because there are always delays. But, of course, the normal regional train has delays as well. Well, we don't want to complain too much about the trains because, you know, we don't want a Mussolini type to take office and promise to get the trains to run on time. But it just would seem to me that a common sense approach to the economic woes would be something that we ought to be taking. And now, I don't know if you're at all familiar with this situation, and this comes as the Dow closed pretty high today. I don't know whether they hit a benchmark or not, but I know that the trading was in the positives, and there was a lot of excitement about possible economic growth indicated. But there's some concern about inflation because Germany is doing really well, and there's some talk in Europe about increasing interest rates, and that might affect interest rates here in the United States, and that could, even though we don't have inflation, cause for what little stimulus we have going to take us further south. Have you heard anything about whether the folks in Washington, D.C. or the Fed are addressing this issue?
I imagine they are, but I've got to tell you it's not a subject I've been covering today.
You know why you haven't been covering it? Because they haven't been talking about it. Because I know if they'd been talking about it, you'd be on top of it. So
there you go.
Yeah, that just shows they're too busy passing laws and repeals that they know won't stand, and rather than look at the real issues that are affecting our nation. Right there is the proof in the pudding. Victoria Jones at the Talk Radio News Service in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us today on News Talk Online on the Paltalk News Network.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.